Welcome to the DecisionWise Engaging People podcast. This is Charles Rogel. I work here as a senior consultant at DecisionWise. I'll be moderating our discussion today. I'm joined today with Dan Hoops.
Hello, everybody.
Dan is one of our principal consultants here at DecisionWise. He's been here for several years now, and today we'll be talking about this topic of team relationships. And I'll frame this a little bit or tee this up by reading the question that we use to measure this concept a little bit on our employee engagement surveys. And the question we use is, I enjoy working with the people on my team. Very simple, very straightforward. In fact, most times we see around 80% favorable responses, meaning 80% of the people say agree or strongly agree to that question. So usually we don't see a problem with that, although I guess 20% of the people are not agreeing with that, which means there are some teams who struggle.
Yeah, and ideally you would want to have as high a score as possible with the people that you interact with.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to come to work and say, gee, I'm having a miserable experience with this person who happens to be a jerk that I'm working with.
Right.
We spend too much time at work to not have that quality of interaction, not only between our team members. So when we think of relationships, I don't think of just those that immediately that I work with, but all of the supporting functions as well.
Everyone you interact with.
So what's my interaction with them? So when I think of what is my quality of interaction, I think of it much broader than just the members of my team.
So as we talk about this topic, I was going to have you maybe describe certain, I guess, how this manifests when it's not working. What are the typical causes, problems, examples that kind of appear? Yeah,
let me give a couple examples. One was me. Actually, as this team
you were
relationship,
the problem?
I was. And then the other one was when I was leading a team.
Okay.
I am by nature more quiet.
Uh-huh.
If you go to the Myers-Briggs, my preference is towards introversion.
Mm-hmm.
And the upside of that is you think through things a lot. The challenge with that is you think through things a lot, and they're not generally verbal.
Yeah.
And there was a person on my team, a peer of mine, and she was a very, very verbal person. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd sit in these meetings, and it's like, well, if I didn't have anything to add, if it had already been said, then why would I say it again? Well,
typical introvert response.
Typical introvert. Yeah, it is. It's like, well, it's already been said. I don't need to say it again. Well, it created a point of conflict, actually.
Wow.
It wasn't just, hey, Dan's being a jerk and he's not talking to me. And she did one of the most impactful things that's ever occurred into my career. And when I was in the corporate office, she said, hey, Dan, let's make some lemonade. And I thought, there's a metaphor for things aren't going well, so let's go make some lemonade, if you will. No, we literally went and made lemonade.
Where did you do this at?
She brought in all of these different things that we could mix with the lemonade, and we had strawberries, and we had this, and we had that, and we tested lemonade, and we sat in this conference room, just her and me, for about an hour. Just one-on-one, laughing, getting to know each other a little bit better.
Uh-huh.
And here it is 12 years later, and I still remember the interaction that I had with her. So when I think of team relationships, it's not only building the quality of the relationship, but understanding what is my contribution if this relationship isn't going the way that it should.
Yeah. But
then having the courage in a very positive way to go make lemonade, if you will.
Yeah.
So when I think of that and this notion of working well with each other and building those relationships, the relationship has to be in service of something. What do I need to get out of the relationship? But I still want to be genuine. I still want to be true to who I am, but there's a purpose behind the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And as she and I worked together, it was clearly so that we could collaborate more, that she could trust what I was and understand what I was thinking, that I understood her motives of why she would say something that may have been different than what I would have thought. And, it was several years after that, and we were linked in together and sending a message back and forth, and it still became one of those points that brought us together. I contrast that with another experience when I was leading a team, and we were integrating a number of new members onto this team. And there were two members that did not get along.
Mm-hmm.
So when we answered the question, hey, do you enjoy the people you're working with? It's like, no, they were not. They were oil and water.
Yeah.
They just, one would say one and something, and the other one would say, no, I don't see it that way. And it would escalate many, many times in our team meetings. There was one team meeting where it just absolutely blew up between the two of them. And it was having an impact on the quality of the ideas and what we're trying to execute as a team. And as the leader, I said, you two need to go fix it. I didn't think it was my responsibility to say, oh, well, how are you thinking and feeling? And
or moderate some conversation.
Moderate. Yeah. I'm not an arbitrator.
Okay.
I think it's as two adults, they own the responsibility to go and work that out.
Tell them to go make lemonade, or would you?
Well, it goes back to my dad was a veterinarian.
Uh-huh.
So I have to caveat this with my dad was a veterinarian.
Right.
So when I tell an animal story, it's not about abuse. So growing up with my dad, we always had animals in the house.
Yeah.
We always did. And as you know, dogs and cats don't really get along with each other. Well, we had a coat closet in our house, and my dad, anytime we'd brought a cat home or a new dog and they were hissing and fighting each other, he'd throw them in the coat closet overnight.
Oh, jeez.
and as I still remember, I don't know how old I was. It's like, well, is that okay to do, Dad? And he's like, well, either they'll work it out or one of them will kill the other. And I'm like, well, I don't want to have a dead dog in the morning. He's like, I've never had a problem.
Really?
He says, every time I've done this, I open the door and they walk out friends.
That's so funny.
And the cat and the dog, they just kind of jump out and they never have a problem hissing or fighting each other. And I think the same, metaphorically, the same thing happens in teams and relationships. They should work well, but at times they don't. And being able to get in the coat closet, if you will, and as adults have a great conversation of understanding the barriers or the difference of styles, like mine of being more introverted versus extrovert, I think is one of the keys of ideas or actions that leaders can be aware of in order to create that synergy on a team, ultimately that leads to higher levels of satisfaction and engagement.
Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned those things, just having either two people that are kind of bumping heads, work it out. The idea of introversion versus extroversion reminds me of, the assessments or team assessments we've done, like our Myers-Briggs type indicator or something, and a team building activity around that where everyone learns about people's preferences and personalities and come to better understanding. Typically when I'm working with organizations, I see a few things where teams might not be working that well together. And to the examples you pointed to, a new team coming together, so just newly formed, or you have kind of different levels within a team. So I saw one organization that had had low scores because they had kind of the full-time salaried employees and some temp employees that were both involved in the same team. And the full-timers felt like the part-timers weren't necessarily pulling their weight or as committed, and they weren't. And so it just created this dynamic where there wasn't a lot of trust, and they didn't really work well together.
And conflict. Yeah, I've also seen that not only with those with the temporary teams versus the full-time teams, but I've also seen it between teams. Mm-hmm. One of the questions we also asked in the survey is this notion of collaboration and cooperation between departments and sharing information back and forth. One of the companies that I was working with when I was internal, the product development and the engineering team leaders were always butting heads. Yeah. And product design wanted to do something, and engineering said, well, we can't design that. And then engineering says, well, we want to do it this way. And product development say, well, we can't sell that because that's not what the end user wants. Mm-hmm. Well, the senior leader there did, I think, one of the most insightful things of resolving that I've ever worked with. He had him switch roles permanently. So they left Friday afternoon as the VP of engineering, and he came back Monday morning as the VP of product development. And the VP of product development left Friday afternoon and came back Monday morning as the VP of engineering. Yeah. And it was really insightful on what happened with the quality of the interaction between those two big functional organizations, simply because of a change at the leadership. All of a sudden, the person that was over product development, who's now over engineering, is like, oh, now I get it. And same thing happened with the person that was now in product development. It's like, oh, now I understand the customer needs better, and I can deliver against that. So part of what I think also creates those relationships is not only, the style, but sometimes it's a structure issue, or it's an information issue, or it's an appreciation of what the others are doing. If I'm a part-time employee, what you're talking about earlier, or I'm a temporary employee, that's my job. Yeah. My value proposition back to the organization probably is a little bit different than if I'm a tenured employee and I've been there for 5 or 10 years. So understanding and appreciation the value that each of those functions bring, or job roles or classifications, I think is another key to the relationship outcome.
So there's a lot of opportunities for like team building activities out there, and trust falls, river rafting trips, whatever.
Yeah.
What are your opinions on those type of things?
I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan.
I'm not a fan. I think the best way to build a team is to win.
Okay.
Clarity around what our outcomes are, being able to deliver against those outcomes, celebrating the success of what we've achieved, and making sure that there's a high level of compatibility between the team members. I've been on trust falls. I've been in rope courses. I've been on rivers. Hatchet throwing with my team.
Yeah.
They're fun, but I've always missed the connection of, well, how does this help me make a better team? I was helping my son understand that. He was on a basketball team, and he was pretty good, and they lost a game. I said, well, how does it feel to lose? He's like, it doesn't feel very good, Dad. Well, then go win. And I think the same thing happens with teams when we can build a team that understands what they're delivering against, clarity on the role that they bring to the team, how those relationships can support each other, because I maybe have a very different view than what you do, but not underappreciating the value that somebody's trying to bring on those teams and make them very complementary. That's for me as a weaving those relationships into a team outcome. I want to go have a good time with my team. Yeah. And I want to build those relationships. And I want to create those opportunities to have times of decompression and laughing and eating and enjoying each other at times. But I want to separate that from the outcome of building and winning as an output.
And so another question I was thinking of is, as a manager maybe is working with the team, and they're trying to, of course, manage to the individual, do more personalized management, but they're also trying to be fair. And so this issue of fairness or unfairness on a team, people tend to feel like, hey, that one person's being treated better or differently than I am. I don't like that.
Yeah, and that's what I found. That's mostly in the perception of the receiver.
Okay.
What I've learned is that employees want to have, in the relationship on their team and the quality of interaction, understanding how they can have a career best. So when I was building this team that I was talking to you earlier, the lens that I wanted them to look through was making this a career best. In other words, what we were doing was so profound and so worthy of recognition that it was worth putting on your resume. And when we focused on something higher level than just the interaction and the squabbling, the relationships congealed in a really wonderful way. And they began to understand and have conversation about, well, what creates a career best? And how do we win as an entire group and a collective group versus the things that would distract us? So focusing on the things that help us win, understanding what would make a great career experience, how does that feel, and then being able to repeat that very frequently.
Great. Anything else you want to add on the topic around creating good team dynamics?
I think they're critical. If I were to close with one thought, it would be if a member of my team at one previous organizations left, and she left for a very well-known software company. And I loved what they put as the last bullet point on their job descriptions when they were posting a position out to the public. And the last bullet point said, "No jerks allowed." And they made it very explicit on their job postings that from a team dynamic standpoint or from a relationship standpoint, that no jerks are allowed. And I'm actually supportive and a proponent of that. If there is somebody that is detrimental to the overall relationship, to the team, and the team is being sub-optimized because of that one individual, I would hope leaders that would have enough courage to say, they're damaging the relationships to the extent where they don't enjoy working with others.
Yeah.
So we now have segments in on our team, and we're not unified, and we're not going to be able to win.
So at the extreme end, you might have to take action, either remove that person off your team, let them go, or hopefully address it. Performance management basically kicks in.
Yep. But don't tolerate it.
Yeah.
But don't tolerate it.
Excellent. Well, Dan, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining us today on this topic about team relationships. We hope you join us on our next podcast.
Great. Thanks, Charles.